Hello dear students, in this video we are going to see cost accounting, one of the most important topic of managerial accounting. Myself Professor Vaishali Bharat Khola. See what is mean by cost accounting? Cost accounting, see there are three branches of accounting: financial accounting, cost accounting and managerial accounting. Financial accounting part we have already completed. Now we are going to see the cost accounting, one of the most important branch of accounting. Cost accounting means what? Cost accounting is the application of cost and cost accounting principle, methods and techniques to the science, art and the practice of cost control and the ascertainment of profitability, as well as the presentation of information for the purpose of managerial decision making. See here you can see the science, art, okay, and practice. We are going to see what it indicates. First of all, cost accounting is a science. In what sense it is a science? Cost accounting is a science, art and practice of cost accountant. Science indicates the possession and the application of relevant systematic knowledge, that indicate the science. What is meant by art? Art indicates the skill and ability of cost accountant, and practice indicates a continuous efforts on the part of cost accountant. Okay, that is a cost accountancy. See, in this definition you see costing and cost accounting. These two are different things. See, the term costing and cost accounting should not be confused with each other. Costing indicates the process of ascertaining the cost, which can also be done arithmetically. And cost accounting indicates the process of recording the cost in a formal and systematic manner with the intention of preparing the statistical data therefrom to ascertain the cost. This is the distinguish between costing and cost accounting. Clear the definition of cost accounting? Cost accounting is the application of costing and cost accounting principles, methods and techniques to the science, art and the practice of cost control and the ascertainment of profitability, as well as the presentation of information for the purpose of managerial decision making. That is the definition and concept of cost accounting. Now what are the different objective behind cost accounting? Development of cost accounting. First and most important objective is ascertainment of cost and profitability. Ascertainment means calculation of cost and profitability with the help of various principles, methods and techniques, okay, of accounting. Then second objective is controlling the cost. This indicates the process of controlling the cost of operating the business. Controlling the cost means what? This process in turn involves the some stages. First, the plan the operations, which can be done by the establishment of budget and standards. Okay, then execute the plan, then measure the actual performance and the comparison of plan and actual performance, then computing the variation between the plan and actual performance and taking the decision to maintain the favorable variations or to remove the unfavorable variations. That all practices or activities come under controlling the cost. Means plan in which to plan it includes the budget and standard preparation, then execute the plan, then measure the actual performance, then comparison of actual with plan, then computing the variation between the plan and actual, and taking the decisions to maintain favorable variations or to remove the unfavorable variation, that are come under controlling the cost. This is the most important objective of cost accounting. And last objective of cost accounting is a presentation of information to enable managerial decision making. See, unless and until the result of any result or action are presented correctly to the person who takes the decision in respect of the same, the study has no meaning. That's why main objective of cost accounting is presentation of information to enable managerial decision making. These are the objective of cost accounting. Now one of the concept come in cost accounting is a cost center, because we calculate or ascertain the cost for specific cost center. That's why what is meant by cost center? Cost center is a location, person or item of equipment or a group of these in or connected with an undertaking in relation to which cost may be ascertained and used for the purpose of cost control. That is the meaning of cost center. Now there are different types of cost center. First is impersonal and personal cost center, and another is production and service cost center. Impersonal cost center and impersonal cost center consist of location or item of equipment. For example, region of sale, branch, department, grinding machine are the example of impersonal cost center. Then personal cost center consists of a person or group of person. For example, finance manager, sales manager, work manager are the example of personal cost center. Then production and service cost center. Here production cost center is the one where the production activity is carried on. For example, machine shop, paint shop, assembly shop are the example of production cost center. Then service cost center. Service cost center is one which assists the production activity. Okay. For example, store department, internal transport department, labor office, maintenance department, account or costing department are the example of service cost center. Clear the concept of cost center? Okay, now we are going to move for the cost unit. This is another word come under cost accounting, or another concept come under cost accounting, that is a cost unit. Cost unit is, it refers to a unit of product, service or time in relation to which cost may be ascertained. That is nothing but the cost unit. Now we are going to see the classification of cost. How cost is classified. Okay. Classification is the process of grouping the cost according to their common characteristics. Classification is the process of grouping cost according to their common characteristics or features. Costs are classified based on nature or element, function, variability, normality, and decision making and controllability. First is nature or element. On the basis of nature and element, cost is classified as a material cost, labor cost, and overhead cost. In detail, we are going to see in the next slide what is meant by material cost, labor cost, and overhead cost, because these are the part of cost sheet. Okay. Material cost, labor cost, and overhead cost. These costs are further classified into direct material cost, indirect material cost, direct labor cost, direct labor cost, indirect labor cost, overhead, direct overhead, indirect overhead. Material means the material which are used in production, that we call it as a material cost. Material may be indirect and direct. Labor, the labor work for the production of specific unit, that come under labor. Overhead means different or other charges other than the material and labor, that is, or we can say the service, that we call it as a overhead cost. We are going to see in next slide in detail what is indirect cost, indirect material, indirect labor, indirect overhead, direct overhead. Okay, this is a classification of cost based on nature and element: material cost, labor cost, and overhead cost. Then on the basis of function, the classification of cost on the basis of various function of a concern is known as function wise classification. Here there are four important function divisions in any organization, that is production cost, administrative cost, selling and distribution cost. Production cost is related to production department, administrative cost is related to the admin department, that is account, audit, supervisor. Okay. Selling and distribution are related to the selling activity and distribution activity. This is a classification based on production. Then variability. Variability on the basis of variability with the volume of production. Listen. On the basis of variability with the volume of production. Cost is classified as a fixed cost, variable cost, semi-fixed and semi-variable cost. Okay. Fixed costs are those costs incurred which remain constant with the volume of production. Okay, fixed cost is a cost incurred which remain constant with the volume of production. Okay, rent and rent of office, factory building are the example of fixed cost. Variable cost are those costs incurred directly with the volume of output. For example, cost of material, wages to worker are the expenses chargeable with the direct proportion to the volume of production. That cost we call it as a variable cost. Semi-fixed and semi-variable. Okay, semi-variable costs are those costs incurred partly fixed and partly variable with the volume of production. Accordingly, it has both fixed and variable features. For example, depreciation and maintenance cost of plant and machinery. These are the semi-fixed or semi-variable cost example. Okay, classification based on variability is fixed cost, variable cost, semi-fixed and variable cost. Now, classification based on normality. Okay, costs are classified into normal cost and abnormal cost on the basis of normality features. Normal costs are those incurred normally within the target output or fixed plan, and abnormal are costs are which are beyond the control of the organization. That cost we call it as a abnormal cost. Last classification is based on decision making and controllability. Okay, based on managerial decision making and controllability, the classification are as controllable, uncontrollable, sunk cost, opportunity cost, replacement cost and conversion cost. Controllability cost and uncontrollability cost. Controllable costs are the costs which can be influenced by the action of specific number of an undertaking. Controllable cost incurred in a particular responsibility center can be influenced by the action of the executive heading that responsibility center. For example, direct material and indirect material cost. That is a controllable cost. Okay. Uncontrollable costs are those costs which cannot be influenced by the action of specific number of an undertaking. In fact, no cost is controllable. It is only in relations to a particular individual that may specify a particular cost to either controllable or non-controllable. For example, rent, rates are uncontrollable cost. Then sunk cost. Sunk cost, these are historical cost, which sunk cost is a historical cost which were incurred in the past and are not relevant to the particular decision making problem being considered. While considering the replacement of a plant, depreciated book value of the old asset is irrelevant as the amount is a sunk cost, which is to be written off at the time of replacement. Unlike incremental or decremental cost, sunk costs are not affected by increase or decrease of volume. Example of sunk cost include dedicated fixed asset, then development cost already incurred. These are the example of sunk cost. Sunk cost is a historical cost, remember. Opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means the cost of foregoing or giving up an opportunity. That is, we call it as an opportunity cost. It is the notional value of going without the next best use of time, effect and money. This indicates the income or potential benefit sacrifice because a certain course of action has been taken. That we call it as a opportunity cost. An example of opportunity cost is market value forgiven or sacrifice when an old machine is being used. That is the example of opportunity cost. Then replacement cost. Replacement cost, such expenses may be incurred due to factors like change in method of production, an addition or alteration in the factory building, change in flow of production. These are the different factors which are the reasons for the replacement cost. Okay. All such expenses are treated as a production overhead. When amount of such expenses is large, it may be spread over a period of time. That is a replacement cost. When it will be happen? When there is a change in method of production or an addition or alteration in factory building, change in flow of production. At that time, replacement cost is occur. Conversion cost. Conversion cost are those costs incurred while converting materials into semi-finished or finished good. Okay. It is the aggregate of direct wages, direct expenses and overhead cost of converting raw material into the finished good. Okay. Or finished product. That we call it as a conversion cost. This is all about classification of cost. Now we are going to see next part, that is element of cost. Okay, element of cost means what? Element of cost, the cost element are broadly classified into three parts: material, labor and expenses. Material, what is material? This is the cost of commodities and material used by the organization. This is the cost of commodities and material used by the organization. It can be direct material cost or indirect material cost. Okay, direct material cost in bracket represent the example. Okay, example of that specific element of cost. Okay, direct material cost indicate the material which can be identified with the individual cost center and which become an integral part of your finished good. That material we call it as a direct material cost. It basically consists of all raw material either purchased from outside or manufactured in-house that are come under or example of direct material cost, that is raw material, which is the integral part of your finished good. Now, indirect material cost. Indirect material indicate that material which cannot be identified with the individual cost center. This material assists the manufacturing process and does not become an integral part of finished good. Okay, this material is not the integral part of finished good, but that material will help or assist the production process. That we call it as a indirect material cost. Okay, the example of this type of material is consumable stores, lubrication oil, cotton waste, stationery material are the example of indirect material cost. The next element of cost is labor. Okay, this is the cost of remuneration paid to the employee of the organization. This is the cost of remuneration paid to the employee of the organization. It can be direct and indirect. Direct labor. Direct labor cost indicate the labor cost which can be identified with the individual cost center and is incurred for those employees who are engaged in manufacturing process. Means remuneration paid for the employee who are directly involved in the manufacturing process. That wages come under direct labor cost. Indirect labor cost indicate that labor cost which cannot be identified with the individual cost center and is incurred for those employees who are not engaged in manufacturing process but only assist in the same. That we call it as an indirect material cost. For example, the manager salary, accountant salary, storekeeper salary. Okay, because these persons are not directly involved in the production process. Okay, on the plant. Okay, these are the persons who are indirectly involved or assisting the production process to be happen smoothly. These members salary or these employee salaries come under indirect labor cost. Last element of cost is expenses. This is the cost of service. Expenses is the cost of service provided to the organization and the notional cost of assets owned. It can be direct and indirect. Direct expenses are those expenses which can be identified with the individual cost centers. Example of these expenses are hiring charges for machinery, equipment required for the particular job, cost of defective work for a particular job are the example of direct expenses. Expenses is the cost of service provided to the organization. Now, indirect indirect expenses are those expenses which cannot be identified with the individual cost center. The example of these costs are rent, insurance, telephone expenses, electricity bill, telephone charges, insurance, lighting are the example of indirect expenses. Okay. Again, aggregate of direct material, direct labor and direct expenses. We call it as a prime cost. Aggregate of direct material cost, direct labor cost and direct expenses is a term as prime cost. And aggregate of indirect material cost, indirect labor cost and indirect expenses, we call it as a overhead cost. Okay, clear element of cost. Again, this overhead cost is again classified into different three parts. Okay, here one classification direct, indirect, but this expenses is again classified into three different parts that we are going to see in next slide. Overhead cost is further classified as factory overhead, office and administrative overhead, and selling and distribution overhead. This is the another classification of indirect cost, that is indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses are further classified as a factory overhead, office and administrative overhead, and selling and distribution overhead. Now, factory overhead. Factory overhead consists of all overhead costs incurred from the stage of procurement of material till the stage of production of finished good. Okay, factory overhead include or consist of all the overhead costs incurred from the stage of procurement of material till the stage of production of finished good, that come under factory overhead. Factory overhead are classified into indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses. Here indirect material is consumable stores, cotton waste, oil, lubrication, oil. Indirect labor, wages paid to the foremen, storekeepers, workers, manager salary are the indirect labor cost. Then indirect expenses are carriage, inward cost, cost of factory lighting, power expenses, rent, insurance, repair for factory building, machinery, depreciation on factory building, okay, are the example of indirect expenses. Clear? Factory overhead is classified again indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses. Now, office and administrative overhead. These overhead consist of all overhead costs incurred for the overall administration of the organization. Again, these are classified as indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses. Indirect material example is stationery item, office supplies, okay, are the example of indirect material under office and administrative. Then indirect labor are the salary paid to accountant, administrative staff, director remuneration come under indirect labor cost. Then indirect expenses example postage, telephone, rent, insurance, repair, depreciation on office building, general lighting, audit charges, bank charges are the indirect expenses which are come under office and administrative overhead. Then next, selling and distribution overhead. Selling and distribution overhead consists of all overhead costs incurred from stage of final manufacturing of finished good till the stage of sale of goods in the market and collection of dues from the customers. Listen carefully. The overhead cost, that is selling and distribution overhead cost of all overhead costs consists from the stage of final manufacturing of finished goods till the stage of sale of goods in the market and collection of dues from the customers. Again, these are indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses. Indirect material example is packing material, sample are the example of indirect material. Then indirect labor, salary paid to salespersons, commission paid to sales manager are the indirect labor cost. Indirect expenses like carriage, outward, warehouse charges, advertisement, bad debt, repair and running of distribution van, discount offer to the customers are the indirect expenses. Clear? Overhead cost is further classified as a factory overhead, office and administrative overhead, selling and distribution overhead, and this cost is further classified as the indirect material, indirect labor, indirect expenses. Okay, now we are going to see the relationship among the various elements of cost. When we add direct material, direct labor and direct expenses, we will get the prime cost. When we add factory overhead in the prime cost, we will get the factory cost. When we add administrative overhead in the factory cost, we will get the total cost. When we add selling and distribution overhead in total cost, we will get the cost of sell. And when we add profit or margin in cost of sale, we will get the annual or sale of the organization. Okay, this is the relationship among the various elements of cost. Now we are going to see the cost sheet. What is meant by cost sheet? The various elements and components of the cost, as we have discussed in previous slide, are presented in the form of statement. That statement is called it as a cost sheet or cost statement. Okay, the cost sheet may be prepared separately for each cost center or may have the common column like cost per unit or cost of previous period. Okay, this is the pro forma of cost sheet. Direct material cost, when we add direct labor cost, add direct expenses, we will get the prime cost. Factory, when we add prime cost, add with the factory overhead, we will get the factory cost, or it is called it as a work cost. And when we add office and administrative overhead cost in factory cost, we will get the total cost. When we add selling and distribution cost in total cost, we will get the cost of sell. And when we add profit, we will get the sale. What is meant by cost sheet? Cost sheet, the various elements or components of the cost is presented in the form of statement. It is popularly known as cost sheet or cost statement. This is all about cost accounting. Thank you.